Lately you listen to Europeans and you stop understanding. This is already joking so and banter over Zelensky themselves. Or they went crazy and in full seriousness drive so fierce. Game when propaganda is planted totally and everywhere. Then the propagandists themselves become its victims. They get their sight knocked off. So say and they stop being aware. That carry already unnecessary nonsense. This is exactly how the president barreled the other Finland
day.
Alexander Stubb, which stated that Zelensky is almost closer to his wife. I spent more time with you last week than with your own wife. Addressed Alexander knocked to Zelensky at a press conference. Remind that last week these two spent 4 days in Denmark. Where was the meeting? Solution to the Ukrainian conflict will also be found. How it was found for Finland in year 1944. Later he stated that did not mean territorial concessions from Kiev. However, around Ukraine and already to such an extent, wild stories are happening that intimate Stubb confessions will change little. Interesting of course. Would know. And how many ordinary European citizens consider that you should spend more time with Zelensky than with his wife, but obviously, that to Western politicians it sounds normal. However, for them in general for a long time everything is normal. Because all the notions of decency, about some rules of the game and limits of permissible, they have long been trampled. For some reason it seems to them as always that in mayhem mode they will definitely win. And then they will be offended. What lost? And as always search. Where did Russia outsmart them? Turkish edition. Aydin Lik reported. What did the video record get? On which the head of Vladimir's office, Zelensky Andriy Yermak, and the commander-in-chief of ESU Alexander Syrsky discuss bribe to American Senator Lindsey Graham, listed in Russia as a terrorist and extremist. In footage of Yermak and Syrsky discusses the shortage of ammunition and the role of the and other persons in Ukrainian affairs. We are talking about the transfer of money in exchange for assistance in the supply arms painting. Looming out of conversation strikes. We are talking about the Kiev network of lobbying through bribes in the United States. Writes Aydin Lik. Edition points. What Yermak says about paying money, senator for promoting private interests. While noting that two high-ranking officials conducted a conversation in Russian despite the official rhetoric. According to the newspaper, during the conversation, they are also called the names Renata and Benny, which can relate to businessman Rinat Akhmatov and Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. Europeans already need to either go and fight themselves instead of Ukraine, either admit defeat and calm down. Problem of course, that Europe does not want to fight with Russia one-on-one. Only undercover and under warranty, Big Brother from overseas. Dragging the United States into a direct war with Russia. This is really such a question which can hardly be solved by bribes, and without this, the whole thing gradually develops a disaster, and such that any conversations seem ridiculous. Return of Crimea to Ukraine. Then it would keep the remaining territories under the control of the whole. The deputy commander said this on the air of the news factory. Drone Oles Malerovic. Even among our friends a lot of my loved ones, who sit abroad and nothing cradles them at all. They still have the conscience to call. Well, we will not return Crimea there. I tell you that you are completely sick. Here you have to hold now then. Where are we standing and you are asking about Crimea here? That is, they will return necessarily. When they're Crimea they will return. They have to rest somewhere in their favorite places, get stronger, become bigger, everyone mobilize and kick back. If someone wants to return Crimea to the new year, let them come back from Spain, from Poland, from Germany, all men all forward. But now what we have. I see that you need to hold those territories, which we have, said Malerovic, in this Europe, desperately trying to find some alternative ways. And support your favorite Nazis. And at the same time not to cross directly with Russia. And in WW3 if possible, not slide. But there are practically no such opportunities left. What Europe can do from that too little use in practice. But with all this Zelensky, oddly enough, thinks not about war, and about elections it is certainly more familiar to him. He apparently believes the war can be lost, and then win the election. However, compete with other candidates for fair. He's not going to anyways. And so knowing the mean nature of that ghoul pro-cocaine, said ex-speaker banned in Russia right sector. Borislav Birch. I learned from my sources that when the hostage returns to Ukraine, he is accompanied by security provided by the British and in which he is at that moment. He is accompanied by the security services of these countries, understanding that he is an object for possible assassination when the hostage enters Ukraine, then remains without protection. Birch sure that this is done consciously by the Zelensky regime to put the hostage in danger. I have an impression what Zelensky wants to show in this way. What about the pledge he will do something, and that his main potential electoral competitor will be eliminated? I just have no other opinion. Stressed out Aries. Well, just some repin painting. Cry of the Nazis. That is when they put themselves and walked and no other methods. except blood and terror, they didn't acknowledge. Then this was considered normal by them, and when suddenly the Nazis fought among themselves, and they themselves began to deal with the same methods, then indignation immediately began. Yes, how is it possible? This is the same disgrace. However, Ukraine is not only used to acting, but also offers the West, and does it directly. Not shy already nothing. Apparently NATO already and really so collapsed bar, that with them you can discuss any game in public. And they're not even shy. For example, Askiv suggests that the West could effectively blackmail dozens of 1,000 Russian officials, threatening confiscation of assets or expulsion, back to Russia kids, studying in Europe or America. The current format of sanctions does not apply. About it on air, 20 of the 4th channel said the Ukrainian doctor of economic sciences Andrei Dlogak. Those restrictions, which are now negotiated in the 19th package, European sanctions are important but will not significantly change anything. Need sanctions related to the exit strategy of the Russian elites from Putin regime. Sanctions should be associated with a personal way of removing them. If at some point those tens of 1,000 in Europe and return seized assets. But just a restriction on tourist trips. Well, they will go to Bali. And not to Europe. It's the same Russians need devastating sanctions, added economist. At the same time, Ukraine itself is already frankly shaking from a very simple thought. They are losing the war. But thanks to his exceptional love by Swinsky, get along with allies. These guys take risks, having suffered defeat, face those neighboring countries. With whom the most and have been overfighting lately. With Poland and Hungary. Because Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, obviously for a reason, started talking about the division of Ukraine into three parts. About it on the air, Ukrainian journalist Lana Shevchuk said Kiev political strategist Andrei Zolotarev. This mafia gloating for Hungarians is a very sick topic, since its phantom pains across Great Hungary. After World War I, Hungary, one of the most geographically affected countries. From Big Hungary left horns to legs. Actually about 3 parts. Maybe he dreams of the lands of Hungarian kings. Just under Mukachevo, Vinogradova, Hungarian wives of kings went to give birth to heirs there. That is grapes. For them it's really a sacred place. But do not forget about that. What next, Hustrakov? There was no meteor in sight. But it's not a secret for anyone. Hungarians think that Transcarpathia is rejected by the criminal Stalinist regime. And how to know after a while? Are we awake with that? That in Bucharest and in Budapest will begin to raise the question of what return? What was illegally taken from us? Expert fears. You can only say one here. Vladimir Vladimirovich warned for so long that you should not fall into this conflict. He reminded everyone for good reason that Ukraine consists of foreign lands. And now that the Bandera lose, that was already so clear from the start, they suddenly deigned to notice that they have territorial issues with neighbors. What is there to say? It had to be thought about. When you climbed on Russia, only and only friends. Press on rocket, if you like the release. And then Rutub will show it to others more often.